That's a lot of bolts. Oh, man. Almost 9. So Canadian car's back. Customer enjoyed the hell out of it. Loves the driving experience. Had 2 complaints. Number 1, he said there's a rattling noise coming from somewhere to the left of the steering wheel. So we went for a test drive. Sure enough, it's those buttons on the end of the turn signal stock. The BC and check button. Yeah, those things rattle on all of these. They did on my dad's car. It took us forever to figure out what it was. We replaced the stock in mid-2021 and no more noise. So I told him what that cost. He's like, oh, never mind. I'll hold the buttons if it bothers me, or shove some Play-Doh in there. Thing number 2, he says between 70, 75 miles an hour, he's got kind of a little bit of a thumping tire balance kind of sound issue from the rear right. Verified that. We'll check the tire balance, get a look at the suspension and alignment specs, but we should be okay there. I'm hoping it's just tire balance. Tire's nice, Michelin Pilot Sport, all season 3 with lots of life in it. So unless he hit something on the way, he drove it a couple 100 miles up to LA and back over the last 2 days. We'll figure it out. Gray car's chilling. White car, Nate's car, is kind of still awaiting suspension components. The eggs came in today, so we'll be able to get those in hopefully tomorrow. And the other bushing, the rear bushing for the diff, is in as well. So if tomorrow is productive on his car, we'll have the differential and potentially the drive shaft back in, and then we've got suspension work to go. I spent a lot of time on the Carbon Black 02 today. Remembered that the engine in this car is not the original engine. It's one that we sold him. That's how I met the owner of this car about 2 years ago, or 3, no, more than that now, probably 3, really early in our dismantling days. Sold him an S62 with 50 some or 70 some thousand miles, so it's a low miler. So the Vanos failure is that much more bitter. But I got it out today. That wasn't too bad. You undo all the bolts around the perimeter. There's 7. The B-sign systems, B-sign, whatever, said that there were 9. That's erroneous. There's 7 5mm Allens. Undo those, take off the oil, high pressure oil line there, and it pulls out about 1 inch. Then you get some really long M6x1 bolts, which I borrowed from my box of S62 parts. The engine we took apart. I think I used thermostat housing bolts. They're long, and you put one end on each side so it doesn't collapse. It stays nice and even with the cylinder head, and as you pull it out, you counter hold these Vanos piston stud things with a 7mm, and then they're reverse threaded 10 mils, and then the whole thing pulls off. So that's cleaned up. The old unit is over here, and allegedly the customer has and will supply us with a new one. Here's the Carnage. This plate thing obviously is destroyed. That must have made one hell of a noise. Then we've got this bearing piece, and that's got some heat in it. Got a bunch of scratches on it. There's 2 of, I believe, 4 bearings, and there was another one in a bag in the trunk, so we might find the 4th one in the oil pan. There's a spring in there, and there was another spring in the bag in the trunk. But I guess that's the actual oil pump, and that just failed. So this whole unit's going to need to be replaced. It's 2,500 or 2,900 new. I have a lead on a used one for 500, but if he can supply me with the correct part, then we'll just do that. And I'll flip it over, and this will look more familiar. That's what you can see with the engine in the car. So I think we're going to do the Vanos rebuild repair kit from Bison Systems with all the O-rings. I guess it's an O-ring rebuild kit. And there's pistons under these covers and probably some sort of gasket. So we'll get to dig all that out and replace all that stuff. On bank 2, on bank 1, we'll do the same, kind of tear it down, do the exact same thing with the O-rings. And we're going to take off the lower oil pan, check the pickup oil pump pickup screen, obviously change the oil and filter, and hopefully have him back up and running in a couple days if I can get those things. It's a lot of labor to tear the engine down this far, just that the fan and fan cowl and expansion tank and radiator hoses, intake plenum, valve covers, air boxes, cabin and engine, all of that stuff has to come apart. None of this is terribly difficult. It's just a lot of disassembly. I put the TDC pin in the harmonic balancer. That's the one from Speed Haven, that's Shoddy's. That thing works very well once you get them lined up, and then you kind of tap it in with a wrench or something that fits in there. You don't want to swing and hit the radiator, obviously. That allowed me to put the 27mm on the intake cam, rock it back and forth, get it to unseize, put it into the full retard position. Then on the exhaust cam, the car is in the way, the chassis is in the way of that, so you have to use a trick wrench, which I've already lost. It's out here somewhere. Also came from Shoddy at Speed Haven Racing. He came out with those parts a couple years ago, and just as a measure of support, I decided to buy them, and I figured I'd need them someday. And today was that day. I'm very happy about that. This is all the stuff that we took off the car, and I took a lot of time today, cleaned everything out in the sink with Simple Green and a plastic brush. Just loads of dirt and grease and grime came off all the intake pipes and valve cover and air boxes and all that stuff. He desperately needs trunk struts, so we're using this gadget, which is fantastic, to clamp the trunk lid open. Otherwise, it's an M5 guillotine. So probably a day or two removed. Like if we had all the parts and I had me and Mike working on this, we could probably knock it out. If we had to in a day, I'd rather do it in 2 days. It'll probably be more than that. Because a job of this scope, you're going to need a bunch of seals and O-rings and crush washers and one-time use fasteners. And you know how that works. You order everything you think you need. You work 3 hours and then you hit the wall. You need this part. You order it. You get that. You make it another 10 minutes. Now you need another part. But I'm going to do my best to go through all the explosions and just buy all the washers and hardware and stuff and have it on hand. If you're wondering what something like this takes, it's right around 24 hours of labor. Mike did a lot of work on the black automatic 540, the 01 today. Automatic transmissions, well, the flex plate or the flywheel, whatever we're going to call that, went back on. And then the transmission went back on. It was a pain to get the torque converter to line up, but it did. Then the bell housing bolts go in. Of course, the last one doesn't want to thread, and looks like the threads are damaged. So the transmission has to come back out. We chase and tap all the threads, clean everything up, put it back in. Get the transmission torqued to spec. We got new mounts and a really clean bracket now in the back. Rear bracket's torqued to spec. The flex disc was installed incorrectly. We fixed that. It has a new center support bearing. It has a new CV joint. We're not digging into the diff this time, so that saves us some time and him some money. Then, doing the automatic transmission service, we put a new filter in there, new pan gasket, clean the hell out of all that. All those torques, they're T27s, go down to 89 inch-pounds, 10 Newton meters. So that's torqued. Tomorrow it'll be filled with fluid. And it's going to take a lot of fluid. We drained out the torque converter and everything. So that's going to get back together tomorrow. We're probably going to need to order more fluid. But then we should have a running and driving car again. Then we'll be able to focus our attention on the front wheel carriers, which is going to suck because he wants to try to reuse a few of these control arms. And that'll be really hard to pop them out of the existing ball joint sockets in those carriers. But progress is being made, and it'll be really nice to not have to push that thing in and out around the lift. Nate, your wheels came back today, and we had a discussion on that. Color is potentially a little light. It's hard to see through the tire mounting goo that's on here. In this light, it almost looks like milky whitish compared to my dad's, which have also been refinished a number of times. They're a little bit less metallic-y, kind of more of a flat paint, but that may be the actual factory finish, because looking at this, it's also less metallic-y than my dad's, and these are now kind of dirty since he's driven the car. As far as I know, that's an original finish wheel, which looks pretty much like yours. I wish they did the barrels in black. That's something I request. They charge more for that and don't like to do it, so they'll be black in no time anyways, the way you use your brakes. Sepang M5 was picked up today. That's on its way home with the owner. It was an AC compressor failure in that car, so we let the sublet take care of it simply because we just didn't have the time or the materials to do that, and we were not scheduled for it. That was a freak failure. So yeah, he owns this car too. He's super happy to have Sepang back and be driving that again. With that, I had Jersey Mike's and some McDonald's fries, the healthiest of lunches today, so I'm not real hungry. I'm going to head home. Here's the tools. This is the S62 cam wrench for the exhaust, and you just put a big old 1/2-inch breaker bar in that. That gives you the right leverage. And then this thing, I don't know what it's, well, I know what it's for because it says S62 crank holder. I don't know if that's for removing or installing a crankshaft or what. Nate, you probably know what it is. I hope to not need that, but I have it if I do. And along with that kit also came a bunch of Vanos air tools. I'm not totally sure what that's all for. Seal valve, a Teflon tape or paste. Some sort of, I think these are cam lock studs over here, these black ones. S62 cam pin. Yeah. Good stuff to have in case you ever need it. Okay, I'm headed out. We'll talk tonight.